I kind of move around when I do this.
Okay, but you're fine. Before that, we could only see part of your mouth.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
So
I am getting the live processing here for Facebook. Let me see why it's not enjoying my commands. Oh, maybe because I ended up pressing the other button. That was silly. So we have people coming on in. Thank you to the people who are attending. We would love it. Those of you who are participating in the webinar, I won't say your names publicly, but if you could just put down in your chat where you're calling in from, where you're participating, because we'd love to know how many people we reached and how far this message is going. So those of you who are attendees in the webinar, okay, Reno, Nevada, woohoo! I think I know that person, but I don't know if I'm allowed to say that I know that person. But there's a wonderful person from Reno, Nevada who's here listening. And we're not live yet, so we're not going to completely start the webinar, but people are coming in. And I'm going to just type this.
So did you say we're not live yet? Because I need to go shut my door.
We are not live yet.
Not live.
You can
Go
go
ahead.
right ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
And I wish I didn't get you to tag me yet. Okay, whoops, that was the wrong name. Yikes. Okay. All right, this is exciting. So it says go live. I'm going to go live anyways. Oh, title. Okay, that's right. I'm going to go live anyways. All right. So we are live on Facebook. They're both gone. That's okay. They're going to be back. It's all right. We're recording. Everybody disappeared. So thank you to the attendees. We are expecting a few more people, but we will be beginning shortly. Might very well be here. Am I allowed to say that though? Am I allowed to say who's in the attendee room? If you're willing to say where your location is, that would be great in the chat. If you want to be identified, that's okay. That's great. Let me know. Otherwise, I don't have to. Yeah, sharing it with all your friends would be a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. So welcome Sharon Jones-Nelson and Carol Ann Marshall and my wing woman, Jody Lewis, the love of my life. I'm so excited that we're all here together to celebrate and to mourn, to honor and to grieve, to feel joy and sadness together. My name is Misha Safran, and I started these webinars, a candid conversation about systemic racism. Well, I would say 450 years too late, but I wasn't born back then. But I can say that of course, I wish I would have started something like this sooner, but I didn't have the know-how, I didn't have the courage, I didn't have the skills. And so what's wonderful is as we learn, as we grow, as we develop, we can offer our talents to the world in so many different ways. And I do feel grateful to say that this is one of my talents, to be able to communicate, to be able to hold space, to be able to send love out to all of you, but also to help educate people in our community and beyond. And so I always get emotional. So if you don't know me yet, you just got to know that I do get emotional. So okay. I'm very grateful for Jody to help me with technology, to kind of pay attention to comments that are in Facebook. So if those are people that are watching on Facebook, we certainly can make comments and we'll share those with the panelists. You can ask questions. I can't guarantee they'll all be answered. Also participants, the people who are attendees here in the webinar, you also can ask questions. You also can, give comments, feedback, love to our panelists. I'm very honored to introduce our panelists. Carol Ann Marshall is a cohort of mine, a colleague in our coaching program, just has a wonderful business that I'll let her talk about. Sharon Jones-Nelson was referred to me by a friend, and we had a beautiful conversation, and I already feel like I know a lot of her, and I'm just grateful that you both trust me to guide this conversation. And so what I'll do is just ask the two of you, I'll go by alphabetical, so I'll ask Carol Ann to start, but if you can just tell us who you are, how you identify, because as I've explained to a lot of people, I have friends who identify in so many different ways, and I don't want to be insulting. So I want, just like when somebody tells me their name, I want to pronounce it correctly. So if you identify as Black, Brown, African American, Canadian African, you know, I know that I love Sharon's title. I'll let her share it, but it's, you know, African American descent of enslavement. I mean, I don't love it in the sense of what it means, but I love that you're willing to call it and own it and say it, because it's a very powerful message. So feel free to explain who you are, where you come from, your identity, the way you identify. And then I would really love for you to tell people what you do in life. What's your business? How could people support you for taking this time to share, well, not yet, but maybe soon, vulnerably with us, as far as your thoughts, perspectives, as well as personal experiences with racism. So you've got the microphone, Carol Ann. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Misha, for inviting me to be a member of this panel. I speak of myself as Black. Right now I'm living in Canada, in Toronto, Canada. I've been here for many, many, many years. I'm originally from Barbados in the Caribbean. So I have a very different perspective of racism than a Black American would have. I grew up on an island that was 95%, that is 95% Black. So I have a completely different way, because I know what it's like to be a majority when I was growing up. I left at 17, and interestingly enough, I spent my last year of high school as an exchange student in Richmond, Virginia. But I didn't experience racism that I know now, because I was a guest. So I was treated differently, but I noticed that I was treated differently from the other Black students. And this was during busing. So it was an eye-opener for me, because it was so foreign to me. I had no idea what that was about. But moving here to go to Canada to come to university, and ended up staying here and having experienced what it was like in the States. Coming here, it was very different in that in Canada, racism is more subtle. In the US, people will be in your face. They'll call you the N-word without thinking about it. It's not quite like that here. People will be nasty to you, but they'll do it with a smile. And it makes it very difficult to try to understand how to deal with that. And there's a lot of racism that happens in housing, where people are turned away because they're Black. All of a sudden, the apartment's rented. Especially if it's in a place where there are people who are, say, upmarket. People would expect you to rent an apartment in a specific area, town. There's quite a bit at work where you don't get a promotion, or you don't get to move out of what's considered the admin ghetto, even though you have lots of qualifications and you've got lots of certificates, you're very well experienced, but it doesn't happen for you. It's a real struggle. Or there will be one person or two people who would be hired, and that will be considered good enough. Yes, we can wave the flag and say that we've integrated. I worked in the Ontario government up until last November in the area of human rights, where we dealt with complaints of harassment and discrimination. And that was a lot of what people complained about, the harassment part, and also the discrimination part, because many of the complainants felt that they were not being either promoted, or they were being treated badly because of their color, their skin color. So got used to that, trying to handle that situation.
Yeah.
those are, I say most of the main things, the two main areas. I was also a police officer here in Ontario, the Ontario Provincial Police, which is, I guess it's probably similar to your, Sharon. We police the whole province.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
And I wrote a post on Facebook a little while ago about situations that happened to me as a police officer, where there was one guy on my shift. The only people he would stop in charge were Black guys. And everybody in the office knew about it. I complained about it. Nobody did anything about it. And also when I was going to I was starting to do a master's program because I came into the into the police force with 2 degrees. I had gone to university and I was a school teacher before I joined the police force. And I was going back to school to do a master's degree, and I was told, one of the officers said, "What the F do you want to do this for? Do you want to make us look bad?" And then when I was also applying for a job to teach rookies, I'd been on 6 years, and I was applying for a job to teach rookies, and I didn't get it. And I suspect that had part to do with it, because I was a qualified school teacher and I'm teaching people who knew less than me. These were brand new students, people coming in to be police officers. So I couldn't figure that one out. And the person with the least amount of experience who were in the teaching of the officers had 11 years service. I had 6. So there are subtle things that happen, and you can't put your finger on it. You just know. It's like the times I've walked into a store dressed in a suit, an upmarket store, and get followed around.
Right.
I wasn't dressed shabbily. I was dressed in a suit, carrying a briefcase. You get followed around. So it's little things that you know, and you can feel it, but you can't really tell.
Right.
And nobody would believe you when you say that this has happened to me, because they've not had that experience. Yeah. So it's been navigating and lots of times ignoring things that people have said and things that people do, just ignoring it and developing a thick skin and letting it run off you. Or sitting in the subway and somebody comes, or you come and sit in a spot and the person that you sat beside gets up and moves and go and sit someplace else. So you know, but it's not blatant, it's not overt, it's not in your face the way it is down there.
Yeah.
A little more subtle here.
Yeah, thank you for that introduction. I want us to be able to go into that a little bit more after Sharon has an opportunity to share who she is. But I'm curious, Caroline, can you just let people know what do you do now? Because I know that you are a coach and you have some wonderful services that you provide. Yes,
I'm a relationship coach. I'm a certified conscious uncoupling relationship coach. And my mission is to help women to claim their power in their relationships so that they can feel respected and honored and live the kinds of lives that they deserve.
Wow.
So that's what I do. And I have a 6 months program that I work with my clients with. And I have a private Facebook group so that people can come into the Facebook group and talk about issues that they want to talk about relationship wise.
Yeah.
And I post regularly. Every day I post something in my Facebook group.
I know, really good stuff too. Sharon, you'll have to join that group too. It's beautiful. So what I would love, Caroline, if you want to put your website or your links, anything you want to put in the chat for the attendees, and then I will also put it, or Jody, one of us will put it in the Facebook group where we're streaming live. But then I have a YouTube channel where all of these webinars are uploaded, and I'll also put that information in the YouTube section.
Okay.
So put whatever you want in the chat and we'll take care of the rest. So wonderful. Those women are going to be are very lucky to have you. And the more that come to you, yeah, you're making a beautiful difference for women.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, especially in this time of COVID
Especially.
and shut down, where if your relationship had a little crack before, that crack has now become quite wide, and honestly, it's not going to close.
Yeah.
You can't ignore it anymore. You've got to do something about it.
Well, and there's a lot of harm too that can happen during that time period.
Oh yes, this has been a bad time.
She's an attorney and she helps victims of domestic abuse.
Yeah.
And
that's usually
COVID. So
yeah, that's usually what's happened. Is most of the times that women do not have power in a relationship, they're usually emotionally abused or physically abused. I'm not focusing on the physical abuse. Yeah. I'm focusing on the emotional abuse, because that's, for me, that's the part that people don't talk about.
Right.
And it's no respect of persons. It doesn't matter what your social status is. It doesn't matter where you live.
Right.
Nothing. It happens to everyone. It can happen to the person who's the CEO of a company and the cleaner in the same company.
Yep.
So it's across the board. So that's my mission, is to get women to wake up.
Wonderful. And help them compassionately wake up.
Yes. Yes. Wake them up and then hold their hands gently and help them to get their power back.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, when we mentioned what you do, one of our panelists wrote, "Amen to that. Absolutely beautiful." So
thank you. Thank you.
Yes, yes. So Sharon, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Sharon Jones-Nelson, and I am African American, a descendant of the enslavement. I also am a grandmother, a mother, and I call myself the nanny of the community. My house is a safe house. Everybody comes to my house. Even in the pandemic, I have still had all the kids I kind of have a place for lost kids, you know. I've worked in many, many fields, but I always said I was going to end my career with the children. And little did I know what that meant. You know, I have a friend, I used to always say I wanted to be a missionary, right? And she said, you don't have to go to another country, just open up your door. Everybody comes to my house. If you need something, you come to me or my home. It's always open, it's always welcoming. And so that's kind of how I see myself. As a result of that, I know that a lot of that happens. I was born in St. Louis, Missouri. And as many of you guys may or may not know, Missouri was a slave state when we had our enslavement. And one of the things I was going to say when I first got on here was about the enslavement, the Article 1, where African Americans were seen as 3/5 of a person. When you're known as a 3/5 of a person, systemic racism started at the very fiber of us landing in this country.
Yeah. And
so it's weaved for me all through, raised in we like to call Missouri the Midwest, but it had many, 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 many Southern attributes, you know, in the fact that I lived in an all-Black community. I grew up in an all-Black community. The stores were owned by Black folks, all of that. As a matter of fact, I thought I cut my phone off. As a matter of fact, one of the things I said to my family when I was getting prepared for this, I'm cutting my phone off, is I have a great-grandfather, my great-grandfather owned property in Shaganoo, Mississippi in the late 1800s. He had 25 acres of land.
Wow.
He was the owner of that. He owned the general store. My aunts and uncles, he had a boarding school for African American children.
Wow.
And so that's the heritage that I come from.
Wow.
You know, education was very important. And as I was learning, I always knew bits and pieces of it, but I talked to my great aunt today to get a little more detailed information. And it turns out that not only did they have all that land, but there was oil on the land.
Oh boy.
So, you know, it was really intriguing to understand that whole piece, that my aunts were the teachers and my uncles, they were the store owners. They were all of that until we left Mississippi and moved out. And moved into St. Louis, where my grandparents were and my mother went, and we went to school, and there was always racism. We used to go to a park called Crondelet Park, and I remember white kids running up to us asking to see our tail because Black people were monkeys and they had tails.
Oh, God. Oh.
You know, I can remember being tormented in two ways, you know, from not being white enough, light enough, not being dark enough to be dark enough.
Yep.
You know, it's always been one of those things that always kind of was there, you know.
Yeah.
St. Louis was one of those places that you knew. St. Louis was divided into, I call it 4 communities. There may have been more, but all I knew was 4 communities. We had the Italian community, we had the Jewish community, we had the German community, and we had the Black community. And the city was sectioned off into those communities. And you knew if you were outside of your community, you knew what would happen. It was just like my aunt was telling me about Mississippi. Even though it was one of the racist places, my grandfather, Walter Stiff, was held in high esteem because he had money, he had property.
He was a landowner, right?
He was, the sharecroppers worked for him. You know, so we always, I now know why my grandmother always told us to walk with our heads up and our back straight. But we always knew that there was this other thing that could happen. We always knew that, you know, if you were caught out after a certain time at night, you had to be careful.
Yeah.
You know, I always say when busing came around, I didn't understand it because we never rode the bus. The men in my family always picked the women up. But I figured out later why, you know, as I became more educated. I went to school, I moved to California, Oakland, California, in the midst of wanting to be a Black Panther.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a part of that community.
Right.
And really knowing that the organization, Black Panther organization, really did start the breakfast program and many of the lunch programs in the Black community, in the schools. Now they're all over the school. Every school district has lunches and breakfasts for children, which is a great thing. I have more, what is it called? It's covert racism is what I run into more. Like you said, when I walk into a store, being followed through a store. When I walk into a restaurant and I have to stand and wait and I see 3 white people get seated before I get seated. You know, those kinds of things happen quite frequently. Or when I'm at work and somebody asks me how I feel about something, I've learned to say, do you want a real answer or do you want a comfortable answer? You know, if you want a comfortable answer, I give you that. If you want what I really think, I'll give you that. But one of the things I always say to them is that I have to work. I needed my job, you know, so I couldn't say too much. I worked for Kaiser at one point, and we did, maybe I shouldn't have said the name. I worked for an organization, and we did
You're not there anymore, right?
No, I'm not.
You can say whatever you want, Sharon. Nobody's got anything against you.
Okay, and so what happened is my coworkers and I, we did this. I don't know if you guys know about Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
I've
yeah.
met her.
So
She's
we
fascinating.
did that because at Kaiser, there were, you know, fewer African Americans than there were people of color, whatever we want to call ourselves today, other than, and I don't mean that in a negative way, I just can't remember all the names that we say.
Right.
So I say people of color to be politically correct most times. Anyway, we did this Blue-Eyed, Brown Eyes, and what that's about, if anybody hasn't seen it, please get it. But it's about how African Americans are treated and white people are treated. And what it shows is the blue eyes. So the blue-eyed people are put in this room with no air conditioner, one window, not enough seating, and they're not told anything. They're just stuck in this room. Where the Black folks are just like, you know, getting around, drinking their coffee, eating bagels and all that great stuff. And anyway, at Kaiser, people got really uncomfortable. Really uncomfortable with that. And they wanted to know why this was going on. And the result of that, to make a long story short, we were called to task. The people who were asked to do the program were called to task. And when they called me in the office, what I said to them is, I need my job. And so I'm not saying anything without a union representative,
Good.
period.
Right.
So they left me alone. My friend, who was a white woman who went in with me, who they called her in, they tore her up. They denounced her. They were very cruel to her because she, having white privilege, didn't think they were going to do anything to her, because I told her, I said, girl, you better go in there with a representative. She didn't think she had to. And so again, just those kind of subtle things. When you stand in line, you know, I went to the WIC office. I have grandchildren. I went to the WIC office. WIC is Women, Infant, and Children. It's a program where they can get formula and different things for families. And I was getting it for my grandchildren. And I go in, and my grandson, it was hot and it was stuffy, and I'm just sitting in this room. They don't say anything to you. You sign this piece of paper and you're just supposed to sit. And my grandson was crying. You know, after a while he got restless. He started whining, you know how kids do. And this guy walks up to me and he says, you need to keep that kid quiet. And I said, what? I said, wait a minute, this is supposed to be for women, infants, and children. Now, little did he know I had just done a training with the director of the program the day before. Because just because you're in a place, you don't know who you're dealing with when you do those things. So I called his boss and said, duh! I said a lot of stuff. So, you know, and that's been the course of my life. You know, I've been a Black major. I was a Black Studies major at San Francisco State in my undergrad, which I think was the most phenomenal thing I could have done in my educational process, because I learned so much. I learned more than our enslavement. I learned about our heritage from Africa. I learned that we were kings and queens. I learned about the transatlantic horrendous trip, the enslavement of our people. I learned that we were powerful and that I could do anything I wanted to do most of the time. I really can do what I want to do all of the time. Can I pay the price for some of the choices that I make? You know, I have grandsons. I mentioned my grandchildren, and I have grandsons, and every time they're out at night, I worry. You know, I hate that I have to have the talk with my children and how they have to be if the police approach. Now, in our community, we do have a little community. They kind of know us. They call me the Christian lady, you know, because I have all these kids at my house. So they say, you're going to the Christian lady house. And, you know, they kind of let them go. But to have that conversation, to have to worry when my kids are out, you know, to hear all the comments people make about the unrest that we're having right now, to have people say to friends of mine, oh, I'm so sick of the looting.
Yes.
Don't they understand the anger and the rage? I'm sick of the looting too. McDonald's, a Happy Meal now costs $10. You know, I'm tired of it. However, it's the anger. People are angry. Yeah. Watching George, the guy, and not just him having his foot on his knee on his neck, but watching the other people, the officers, just watch. Yeah. You know, Brianna. Yeah. I mean, so many people we could comment about that these things happen to. The young man in Sacramento who was in his grandma's backyard and they shot him in the back and he had a cell phone. Traumatic. It's just, I can't even number all the names, and to know that I have grandchildren who have to be subject to that. Yeah. You know, that I see this all the time. Now, when I see something going on, I was at the BART station and they had this black man face down on the ground, nasty ground, in handcuffs. I whipped out my phone and I just said, and they said, you can't do that. I said, I can witness anything I want. Yeah. You know, and we got to do that. More people have to witness it. When I see the cops with a man pulled over, African American man or woman, I slow my car down. I holler over, hey, are you okay? You know, and I'll get out. I'm too old to be out in the protesting because I don't want to get knocked down. My grandkids said I can't do that anymore, you know, but
My children told me I couldn't do it either. It's like, oh, we'll go.
Yeah, they say, stop it, Nana. You know, I went to, my church had a big thing when Tremaine was killed, and in Oakland, I was laying in the middle of 14th and Broadway in the street, laying down, and my grandson walked up and said, Nana, you got to get up. You can't do this, you know. And so that was they said, I can do everything. I can donate, I can get on, but I can't go out and do a lot of that stuff anymore, you know. And one of the things that I know from a lot of the things I've been listening to, the old heads are moving away, and it's time for the young people to come up. And so Black Life Matters, and all of these youngsters and all of these, and I call them youngsters because I'm 65 and I can. But all of these young people are coming and standing up and saying no more.
Right.
No more. No more do we have to be followed. No more do we have to get predator loans. No more when they want our property, they do eminent domain. No more. No more unfair salaries. No more.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I guess that's who I am.
So appreciate.
We hear you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that, you know, you had mentioned that you are also starting a business and you're developing your passion.
Yes. Yes, I am. I'm just in the beginning stages of it, but I want to do court mandated classes. I love educating, and I've done a lot of training in the Bay Area, but these will be classes for DUI, substance abuse, petty theft, anger management, and parenting classes. And I want to do them from an African American perspective. I want to use the language. And so I am very interested in doing all that and witnessing that, because in California, they'll tell people to go to petty theft classes. You know, those are people that shoplifting and stuff. The problem is the only class they have in California is in Southern California. I want to be that person in Northern California. I want to be there for those people. I want to nurture them through. Just like I said, my home, everybody comes to my home, no matter what's going on in their life. You know, I've had homeless families. I had a family, her and her husband and her 5 kids sleeping in my family room until they could get to the next place, because that's what they needed to do. And I think if we can do that more, I mean, it's great to be protesting. I think we need to vote, 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 vote.
Yes.
Check your registration. Vote, 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 vote. I ain't gonna tell you who to vote for, but he's not gonna be blonde. No, kidding.
You're too funny.
I use a lot of humor. I should say that too. I use a lot of humor in tough situations, but very, very serious about the reckoning that is about to come. There is no coincidence that we are in this pandemic.
Yes.
There is no coincidence that Black Life Matters at the fullest right now, that we're all at home, that we're spending more time, we're eating together, we're talking together, we're doing Zoom. I've seen more of my friends on Zoom than I have in years.
Yes.
We moved around, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Sharon, somebody said on Facebook when they heard you talking about your home and the children, everything, they said they're coming to your house.
they can. Look,
You may have more
everybody,
people knocking at your door than you realize, but I can get you ready for them.
do you know, at one time we had 20, I have a huge house, so let me say that. But at one time we had 21 people living in our home.
Wow, that's beautiful.
You know, because that's what was needed. And that's how I grew up. You know, I'm go back to my roots a little bit. That's how my grandmother was, and that's how her mother was. We always welcome people. I mean, when we made our transition from the South, your family would come to your home because we couldn't go to hotels. So they went to family members' homes, and they stayed there until they could get their own place. And then the next group would come up, and the next group would come up. Now we fancy and we stay in hotels and all that stuff and don't go stay with our families. But, you know, that's just part of who I am.
Yeah. So let me
So come on if you're coming.
Yeah, come on over. So I do have a question.
Sure.
This is something that Jody and I have been talking about the last couple weeks. And I know, Caroline, you're not in the United States right now, but you.
I'm sorry, I can barely hear you.
Okay, so I was saying that Jody and I were talking recently about wondering how people of color feel right now, if the momentum is still there or if things are dying down again, and what you feel currently is or has been the biggest culprit in systemic racism. So that's two questions. One, do you feel like the momentum has died down as far as the activity and the support and I mean, of course, the protests have died down a little bit because of COVID, but we're wanting to know, what have you noticed? Do you notice there's been a decline in support, or do you feel like the momentum is still upswing as far as Black Lives Matter?
Well, certainly here, because I live in Toronto, it's the biggest city in Canada. And there is a lot of protest still going on here because we have issues with the police as well. And people are concerned about that. We've had people shot in the last little while. For example, there was East Salvation guy who clearly had mental issues. And the police had an interaction with him. They went to his house. The next thing you know, he's been shot dead. A week later, we had a guy who got into the Prime Minister's residence, not the house, into the grounds, fully armed. The police spent an hour and a half talking to him.
Negotiation, yeah.
He did not die.
He was white?
So, of course.
I just want to make it very clear to the viewers and the listeners, because we can say
white.
It's not obvious to people, and that's the problem.
Yes, he was white.
Yeah.
So you say you have a guy with fully armed, ramming his truck into the Prime Minister's not residence, but into the grounds of where the Prime Minister lives. And they spent an hour and a half talking him down.
Yeah.
And they didn't kill him.
Right.
But they have an interaction with a man who is clearly having mental issues. And that's the other thing about police forces. Yeah. Police forces are not trained to deal with people who have mental issues.
Correct.
I wasn't. I spent 6 years as a police officer. I wasn't. So that's something that needs to be taken away from the police. And when people talk about defunding the police, I don't believe in defunding the police, but I believe in taking a lot of the funds that are currently given to police and put them in places that can be better served from the public's perspective. Yeah. The police should never be called to someone who's having mental issues, because as a police officer, once you go, you're in a confrontation. That's not what you need when a person is mental, when they have mental challenges. They should be, the person coming in should be a social worker or somebody who's trained. And the same thing happened about a month ago with another young woman. She's somehow ended up off her balcony, dead, floors down. Another person with mental issues. So when we're talking about defunding the police, I get it. We're having the same issues here in Canada as you're having there. And it's a matter of training the police to do what police work is and determining what exactly is police work.
Yeah,
dealing with a mental person is not police work.
Right.
They're not trained for that.
Right. So
you have to, I think it's looking at things differently. So for here, the momentum is, it's not ended. It might be waned a little bit, but it's still, people are still out there demanding, particularly that the whole police be defunded and changes made in the police force, the police department, because we have the same kinds of issues here.
Yeah.
And sorry, what your other question was, I missed the other question. You had a second.
The other question was, what do you feel is well, I guess, I think you answered both of them to some degree. I mean, one question was, what is the most common piece of systemic racism? And I think that's the police training and that they're not And the other question was, do you see that the momentum of support for the Black Lives Matter movement is slowing down, or do you feel like there's still momentum? And I think you mentioned that you still have protests there.
Yes.
You did it, Caroline. You answered both questions.
And if I can add to that, I think part of it too is it's not just the police. And the police are the focus because of what happened to Mr. Floyd. I just have a hard time calling him George. I call him Mr. Floyd. I think for me, that's respectful to him.
Absolutely.
And what really bothered me about that, over and beyond the guy kneeling on him, was the casual way he had his hand in his pocket. It was like if he was standing up leaning up against a wall or a fence, having a beer with his buddy.
Yeah.
That really upset me.
It was not.
And yeah, it was a total disrespect.
Welcome back, Sharon.
Yeah, of having, you're there, it's bad enough you've got your knee on his neck.
Right.
But you're having a casual conversation with your hand in your pocket.
Yeah.
What
And the smirk on the face.
Yeah, on his face. So that was the thing that got me. But over and beyond the policing issue, it's the work issue as well. What happens to Black people at work, where so many times you're denied promotion, your qualifications are not respected, and people think, well, how did you get that degree? And I've watched where the police I think it was in Miami, in the midst of the early days of COVID, was driving by this house and got upset because this guy was putting garbage out on the lawn. It turned out he was a doctor working with COVID homeless people. Like it just, so it's work things, that even if you have a decent job, people aren't going to respect you because they don't know what job you've got. And that's why you have to respect people for who they are, because you don't know who these people are. He could be that doctor could be the person, the doctor who would save that officer's life if that officer got shot.
Absolutely.
So a lot of stuff happening in the workplace that needs to be looked at as well. It's not just the police. It's the whole spectrum of everything that Black people have to go through, and knowing full well that it doesn't matter if you're educated or not. You're just seen as an object. Sharon.
I brought up a couple times that I'm still not finished with it because I'm doing the audio version, but I've been listening to the book, So You Want to Talk About Race, by Ijoma Oluo, and she's got some amazing chapters. Talks about work. She talks about the insensitive comments that are made without any regard whatsoever to how uncomfortable it makes that person feel. She's talked about the lack of ability to get promotions. Everything you just said is in her book, and so for me it's painful to hear it twice, and I'm sure I need to hear it 50,000 times. Well, maybe not me as much as some other people, but but I think what you're saying is just devastating, and yet it's our reality. Yeah. And
the one issue we don't have here really is the health problem that we have. Yes. Because there is no person here who will ever lose their homes because of a medical bill.
Medical bills, right.
I was listening to CNN last night. They were interviewing a guy who had been on a ventilator like for 3 weeks, and then in hospital for a couple of months. His bill is well over $2 million. And I'm thinking, how do you ever pay that? How do you pay that? Look, he said, his wife said, but they had called the family to say goodbye to him. And a friend has set up a GoFundMe page. How do you pay that? And luckily, that's one of the things, in spite of some of the issues that we have here in Canada, I'm proud to be a Canadian, incredibly proud to be a Canadian, because it doesn't matter what my health issue is. I can walk into any hospital and get #1 care, top-notch care. I can get the best person, the best doctor in that specialty to deal with me. So that, I find that really, I don't understand that part of and I don't know why people object to other people getting healthcare. I don't, that bit is strange in my brain. I don't get it.
Well, I think, you know, the United States certainly has more of a survival of the fittest approach and a one for one as opposed to one for all.
Yeah.
Right, and here in America, that isn't. I mean, I'm sorry. First, I want to apologize. My computer overheated. That's how hot it is out here.
You see, you were so passionate. You were
Well,
so
don't worry,
passionate.
we finished it up. We got some fans, we put it around. And,
Yeah, don't try to blame it on the heat outside, Sharon. We know it was your passion.
Yes, your passion did it.
I'm a passionate person because I do think that the momentum has and has not gone down. It just depends on where you're at. I mean, there's still there's still protesting. They had a big thing in Antioch on Sunday, Contra Costa. They marched to Martinez. I mean, so they're still doing it, not in the same way, because you have to wait for some results. Yeah. Now, what I'm most afraid of is that our president,
our resident, is that what you meant?
I'm gonna say the president has started sending federal troops. Yes. When he sent federal troops to Portland, he's threatened to send them to Oakland. He's talking about sending them to Chicago. I think we're gonna be in some trouble if that happens.
Yeah.
This whole Black Lives Matters is the first time in my life. I tell my friends, I heard it in the 50s because my families were proactive. I heard it in the 60s and saw a tail bit of it. I saw it in the 70s. I saw it in the 80s. I've seen it in the 90s. This is the first time I've seen it be worldwide.
Yeah, that's the thing.
It's not Black Americans. It's people of the African diaspora.
Yes.
It's Black everywhere.
Yes.
That's starting to stand up and say, me too, it's happening to me too. It's mine, I'm doing it. It's happening to me. Like you were saying, it's happening in Canada, it's happening in England, it's happening in Africa, it's happening in France, it's happening everywhere.
Everywhere.
It's even happening in some of those places you wouldn't think, like in Bahamas and Puerto Rico and different places like that. Because no matter what, when I was in school, part of a paper I did was about Blackness. Some people say in other countries that it's class, that it's classism. I say that it's racism, because when you look at classism, the lower people on the class rank are the darker complected.
Yeah. Look at India with the caste system.
India, anywhere, if you look around, even in other places where the likeness, you know, in Asia.
In the Caribbean.
Talking about, but they don't want to get dark. Because the darker you are, if you say class or race, the more it is. And so here in America, do I think the momentum is going down? Well, we're a little tired. Covert is going up at an all-time high.
Yes. That's a piece of it. And so it makes sense to come in a little bit. But what I'm looking up, they tear gassed the mayor of Portland yesterday. I know.
They're driving up in trucks, throwing people in trucks. If that doesn't sound like Nazism, I don't know what does.
Yeah.
So I think if that keeps happening, and if he follows through with some of the threats to some of the other major cities that he's talking about, Oakland, Chicago, LA, I think we're gonna have a problem.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. And going back and picking up on your point about it being a worldwide thing, I think part of it is for those of us who grew up under colonial rule. I grew up under colonial rule. Barbados did not become independent until 1966. And most countries that Britain ruled lots of African countries, the whole Caribbean. In the 60s, that was the thing, to get your own independence. And there was no fight. It was peaceful turnover. But one of the things about colonialism is that you're not taught your own history. You are taught their history.
Mm-hmm.
So what's happening for most of us now, that we're now starting to learn all of the horrible things about what colonialism did, and who we were, or who we are as Black people. And because we cover such a vast group. If you think of, say, Jews, there's something that holds people together as Jews.
Mm-hmm.
If you think of Japanese, I lived in Japan for 2.5 years. When you think of the Japanese, they have things that hold them together as Japanese. And you look at around the world, people held together because they have a common history. But you look at Black people, we do not have a common history. Our history is mixed up with the Dutch, the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese, the Brits, whoever wanted to subjugate us and subdue us.
Wow,
And
that's quite a point.
For example, the different tribes went to different countries.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell that by the way people in those countries, those islands, react quite differently. And we sometimes you don't even like each other. So you've got a situation where there is not one thing that binds Black people together. And I know certainly in the Caribbean, we consider ourselves West Indian. We don't consider ourselves African or connected to Africa.
Right.
We consider ourselves West Indian. So there's so many different facets
Yes.
to being a Black person.
Yes.
And I think that's why we struggle sometimes, because there's not the one thing that binds us together for us to say we are a people. Makes it very difficult.
Absolutely.
It's difficult.
It's an incredibly poignant statement.
And you know, that was intentionally done.
Oh, yes.
That was intentionally done in the enslavement of our people.
Yep.
They took our language. You know, I got in this big argument with this woman recently about Ebonics. So, you know, in Oakland, California, they tried to start Ebonics in the school as a second language, not as a main language, not as the way we're going to talk forever, but as a second language to try and help African American children have some of the same academic help that other people have who have a second language. Ebonics was started in the 70s at the University of Washington in Missouri. People didn't know that. People started saying, oh no, that's broken English. Oh no, I want my kid to speak the correct English. That is a part of what you were saying, just piggybacking on all the different needs of the different groups of African Americans. It depends on where you live at. If you were raised in California, you have a particular kind of view. Yeah. You know, you had more integration out here than you did in the South. You know, you had more. I spent some time in Africa, and you were right. I was amazed. Now I loved it because everybody was Black like me, but they acted very British.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, you know.
Same if you go to the Caribbean. Yeah, very British.
Look, and what they knew about us as African Americans was what they saw on TV. And they saw Martins, and they saw the pimps, and they saw all of that stuff, the criminals, the criminalizing. When they show criminals on TV, I think somebody mentioned it earlier, I believe it was you, Carol, where if it's an African American, they're in handcuffs, they're face on the ground, you know, they're shot. Yeah. A young white man shot up a Black church, and they took him to McDonald's.
Yeah.
Because he was hungry.
Yeah.
I tell people I saw the biggest white man I ever seen in my life attack the police in San Francisco, and he was put in handcuffs.
Yeah.
So the needs are different depending on where you come from, depending on what you need, you know. But all of it, I have to give a shout out to Dr. Joy DeGruy, who wrote the book Post-Traumatic Black Slave Syndrome, because she equates a lot of the trauma that we have today is reverted to the trauma we had in our enslavement.
Yeah. It's
Or
passed
even
down through the
colonialized.
generations. Yes.
Right. Even in colonialism,
Oh,
we
yes.
had the same things. We weren't enough. We weren't good enough. And
Right.
so that they talk about it being in the DNA.
Yes.
You know,
And
What's
yeah,
the name of that book? Can you say the name of that book again? Post-traumatic?
Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy.
Joy DeGruy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Doctor. Did I say
Yes.
doctor first?
Yes, yes. Dr. Joy DeGruy. Yeah. Okay.
I don't want nobody getting on me about it later.
Yeah. No, I just want to write it down, keep it, because I have a resource list that I have for people to become a little bit more learned and active allies. So I think those are important things to have. Thank you for that. What were you going to say, Carolina? I'm sorry.
sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It'll come back. Come back to
Okay.
me.
My
It
inquisitive.
was something Sharon had said, and I've lost it.
Say it all over again, Sharon. No, I'm just kidding.
Don't get me started.
Just like you did it the first time.
I can't remember.
But I really am talking about how the systemic racism that we encounter every day, all the time, from the time we landed in this country and when the Europeans landed in dark countries, in Black countries, in African countries, to the point that they changed the maps.
Oh, yes, yes.
You know, they even
Yes.
changed the maps in the way that the country looked, you know. And so I just want to say that, you know, I believe that if we, you know, a lot of times people say, oh, that's slave stuff. Oh, I don't want to see that. It makes me mad. Let me tell you something. The Jewish community will watch everything they got about the Holocaust. They will tell you the Holocaust and they will repeat everything about it.
Like it happened yesterday.
Yeah, we as African people, I don't know a whole lot about my family enslavement because they were too ashamed to talk about
it.
They were too ashamed. I do know that something happened because we come in many different shades. You know,
You know that.
We know that. As a matter of fact, as I said earlier, I was talking to my aunt, and she was talking about her mother, which her father was my relative, but her mother father was a white man, and how he took care of his children. You know, I've read today, I was listening to, I'm gonna put out a throw for Joe Madison, the Black Eagle on satellite radio. And he was talking to a woman who was talking about George Washington and how he had slaves and how he was really a part of, and I wish I could remember the name of the book. When I get it, I'm gonna give it to you. But how he had a slave named Oprah, and how he chased her for her entire life. She was a fugitive. How he was a part of, in Vermont, if you were a slave for so long, you could be set free. He rotated his slaves out so they wouldn't get free. Now, I'm not knocking that he was great in the revolution, but he failed on the revolution. You know, and so I'm gonna shut up now for a little while.
That's okay. I remembered what it was that I was going to say. That even though we were brought from Africa to America and to the Caribbean as slaves, and what lots of people don't know is that Indians were also brought to the Caribbean. The difference was they came as indentured servants. They were able to pay off the money they spent, and they were able to get free.
Yes.
We never had that option.
Never.
We never had that option. So even them for us, we're always on the bottom of the heap. They were able to buy their way out, to be able and build businesses, buy homes, all that kind of stuff. We never had that option. We never ever had that option. So the whole point of indentured slavery was that you had an out. We never had an out.
Well, and then you have people in our country, politicians saying, you should be able to do this. You should be able to have, have this job or this career. It's like, wait a minute, there's catching up to do here. You can't just say all of a sudden you have the right, so therefore you should be at this level. Right. That's not, there's no compensation. There's no education provided. There's no, I mean, it's a long time to try to catch up.
Yes. And I watched a video, I can't remember the name of the woman, but she's an activist, and she was very angry in this video. And the last words she said really chilled me. She said, America should be glad that all Black people are fighting for is equality.
Oh, I saw that video. Yes.
And not revenge.
And not revenge.
And I thought,
oh yeah,
that's chilling.
That's, yes, it was
very true.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people say, hey, you had the emancipation, you were free.
Oh yeah,
but in a short amount of time, we did a whole lot. We had Black Wall Street in Tulsa.
Exactly.
We elected numerous people in Congress, and then they came up with Jim Crow.
Yeah.
Right now we had a lot in the civil rights movement. We had a lot of stuff, equal education and those things. We had school busing, but what happened in the end is all the people, Black people, got bused to their school. They didn't get bused to our schools, and therefore the education equality still is bad. Our schools are still the worst schools. Our schools are still the worst schools. Our community. We have a few good schools, but you have to shop around. The average school in the African American community, they don't have books. My kids went to a charter school. When they went to distant learning, that school gave every child a Chromebook. That wasn't true for all the public schools.
No, it's been a huge dispute actually in my school district, because our school district has 35 schools of all levels. And when they had to go to distance learning, you had a large group of schools who had no internet, had single family homes, had no computers. And some schools are like, some teachers and schools and staff are saying, oh, this will be great, we'll all go online. And other schools are going, online? Like, we don't have money for that. We don't have resources. We don't have tools. It becomes an even more, a huge disparity now. Already there was disparity. Right? But now you're talking about providing resources or not providing resources.
And that's one of the things that COVID has done. And Sharon, you said something earlier when you were first introducing yourself about people being at home and being able to watch. And in many respects, I think COVID is a blessing, in that the inequities were already there, but people were not paying attention. Now you have kids out of university at home, parents not working at home, and then you get George Floyd. Yeah. It's in your face. And everything that Black people have been saying has been happening. For the first time, people are seeing it on TV. Yes. And thank God for that young woman who kept filming in the face of being, almost being tear gassed. Like,
that's why I'm saying we got to be a witness.
You have to be a witness. And it's only her determination to film that. Otherwise, he would just be another statistic.
Yes.
But in the midst of COVID, with people sitting around watching TV all day, this is in your face. And then not only did it show up the inequities of policing that people have talked about for years, it showed up the whole inequity in the school system. It showed up the inequity in the health system.
Almost
And it
definitely.
showed up that the people who we really should be emulating and paying attention to and paying properly are the ones who are keeping us alive. And those are the ones that people think of as shit.
Yeah.
All the people in supermarkets keeping us like, who does those jobs? Who cleans the darn hospital?
Yeah.
Who works in the morgue? Whenever I saw those refrigerated trailers in New York that now you're seeing in Texas.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm thinking, somebody's got to be moving all those dead people out there. Who's doing it? So that the people who have kept not just their hair alive, who's looking after our parents?
Yes.
Those are the people that we don't think much of. And those are the people who have kept us alive for months.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really, it's a little virus that we don't know about. We can't see it, but it has made a huge impact in society all over the world.
Yes. Yes.
Because it's forcing other people to look at the inequities in their own countries.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're experiencing some of the same issues.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to bring us back to a topic that we addressed when we lost Sharon, and then Sharon came back.
Yes.
But there was a question from one of our attendees. So while you were gone, Sharon, Carol Ann was talking about the notion of defunding the police. And
Defending what?
defunding the police.
Oh, okay.
Her stance on that. So what the attendee asked, can you expand on your statement that you don't support defunding the police, but that you believe that police responses are mostly exaggerated and inappropriate? For example, police officers showing up for mental health crises and not social workers. So Carol, yeah, if you could expand on that, and then I'd love to hear also Sharon's feelings behind the notion of defunding the police. I know that what I've heard is that perhaps that term was used prematurely.
Yeah.
It's not the idea of defunding the police, but reapportionating. What's the word?
The money. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel.
Yeah.
We need police. You have to have police at some point. If there is serious crime, you have to have the police. You can't, if you don't have police, you're going to have anarchy.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have some way of, and you have to have somebody to call when, say, somebody breaks into your house.
Right.
But to have police go to a situation where you're dealing with mentally ill people, you're not trained. A police officer is not trained to do that. Right. So that's where I feel some of the money that's been spent to give police officers all of this military equipment. Why do you need all this? Why do you need tanks as a police officer? Like, why do you need that? Mm-hmm. A lot of money. I think that the whole police and budget needs to be addressed. Mm-hmm. And looking at what can we do in the community that needs to be beefed up. And we're saying we have no money for it, but you've got all this money in police. It's just like the military. The amount of money that's spent in the military to me is disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. Mm-hmm. So take some of that money, put programs in a community, mm-hmm. so that you start helping young people to get better. Mm-hmm. You train them, you teach them, so that you're launching these young people into the world with a purpose, mm-hmm. not just throwing them out there. And it's the same with the whole mental health thing. Yes. Have programs to deal with people with mental issues. There are a lot of people who have mental issues, mm-hmm. because life these days is tough. Mm-hmm. And it's not just people who are schizophrenic, but the stress today is giving lots of people mental issues. Mm-hmm. So put some money into those kinds of programs that people can access and help them to get better. so that you don't always have to have the police being called for every single, because every single thing is,
Get up, get up.
every single thing.
They can say
Yeah,
hello.
I got grandkids.
I
Get
just
up.
have them say hello. Sharon, tell them to come in and say hello.
They're crying.
But that's okay. Let them say hello. We want to welcome. Give them a hug. Come in and say hi, child.
Say hi.
Hey, sweetheart. Oh,
hi.
you're wanting grandma? Hi, sweetie. Your mom's on Facebook and she's on TV. I mean, your grandma, she's on TV and Facebook. We're talking about how much she loves you.
Nanny love you.
Yeah. Sorry you're crying and you're having some feelings, huh? Yeah.
Okay, so you got some loving. Now go back. Lock the door behind you.
Lock the door behind.
So, you know, I just really want to, I love my babies. It's so sweet. They always run to me for everything. Anyway, but you know, you were talking, Carol, about the funding of the police. I actually agree with you. I know nice cops.
Yeah.
Like I said, the cops in my
I was one of
neighborhood.
them.
I mean, you know, if we, I keep saying, how come we can't go back to neighborhood cops?
That's what you need.
You know what I mean? When I
All
was a
you need to
kid,
know the
my
people.
police officer, he didn't necessarily live on my block, okay, but it was segregation too. He didn't necessarily live on my block, but he lived 3 blocks down. He knew me.
Yes.
The cops in Antioch, they know me. They don't know my name always, but they call me the church lady.
Yes.
You talking about that Christian lady down there? Oh yeah, go on over to her house.
Right.
You know,
So there's a less chance of them assaulting you because they know who you are.
You're right. If they know your name,
Who you are.
yeah. And see, the problem is, you know, I'm gonna go back to my enslavement again, y'all, because a lot of the cops were the overseers, not the slave owners, but the overseers.
Right.
My friend Gloria, I know you ain't on here, Gloria, but you're gonna be proud of me. The overseers started becoming the police officers. They did it with the runaway slaves. They did it in Jim Crow. And so a lot of that mentality is still there, even with officers of color.
Yes.
Because it's the mentality. And so in that way, I think they need education. We need training. But I also totally agree. Instead of so many cops, let's put some social workers in there. Instead of, when you have a person with mental health, let's get a mental health clinician or a social worker or somebody who could do them better service.
Yes.
Whatever happened to shoot to wound, to shoot to kill? Because when it comes to a Black person, it's shoot to kill.
Well, let me explain a little bit about that. As a police officer, you're trained to aim for the biggest portion of the body, which is the torso.
Yeah.
And it's hard to hit a moving target.
Yeah.
So if you're going to try to shoot somebody to hurt them, it ain't gonna happen. Because if you try to shoot at somebody's leg, chances are you're gonna miss.
Right.
But if you shoot at the torso, chances are you're gonna hit it.
But what about those bullets that aren't really bullets, that just hurt you really bad? I mean, they sting, but they don't kill you.
Rubber bullets.
Rubber bullets.
Yeah, they really sting. I saw a picture of a woman who's gone. Oh, they're horrible. But that would have to be a decision. I don't know if they would ever do that.
Yeah, we have to do something though.
And one of his friends got hit by a rubber bullet.
Oh, it's awful.
He was quite bruised.
Sure it is, but they're alive to talk about it.
They're alive to talk about it.
They're alive to talk about it.
You know what I'm saying? They're alive. They can sue somebody about it.
Yeah.
When you're dead, you can't do
anything.
And as you were saying, every day, or at least every week, a Black person is dying at the hands of the police, even with Black Lives Matter and all eyes are on it.
Yeah.
The people who killed Breonna went in her home with a no-knock warrant, had the guy who they was looking for on the warrant in jail, have not been brought to charges. No charges brought against them.
Yeah.
You know, so we have to do something with the police department, educating, but constantly weeding out. And again, as I said, with Black folks, with police officer, witnessing. When you know you got a cop that's doing wrong, witness it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
you have to be accountable.
Yeah. The other thing too about police officers to keep in mind is that they go through the ranks. When you have a rookie, or any police officer, your life depends on the other officer.
Mm-hmm.
If you call officer needs assistance, you want to make sure that the person who's coming is going to get there quickly and coming to assist you. If you don't toe the line and you call officer assistant and you're in real trouble, you'll be dead, because they're not going to come quickly. Because the thing is, even an officer of color, you have to fit in.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be part of the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
And you have officers who have bad attitudes, who get promoted and promoted and promoted. So you need a complete wash of the police department.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if you're trying to educate people, you've got people with mentality that education is not going to do anything.
Exactly.
Well, it's
Do
like
anything.
about teachers. There are some teachers that need to leave the classroom already.
Precisely.
You've got some police officers that need to leave the department or to go or be trained in something different. They need some new opportunities.
Right, and unions make it their business to keep horrible officers around. It makes it very difficult to get rid of an officer.
Right.
There's a comment in the chat. The police are militarized and have no accountability. Policing is not something that can be allowed to have a few bad apples.
I agree.
I agree, totally.
There is an institutional fraternal brotherhood in policing that keeps officers from protecting them.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on internal policy changes that punish officers for not speaking up about internal racism and bad apples?
Well, I think that's starting to happen a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
That really is. I mean, you know, with the George Floyd incident, all of those officers, there are many cases where they're locking up everybody that was there because, you know, I forgot the young man's name who was jogging. And
yes.
And the father and the son shot him, but this other guy was filming it.
Yes.
And he thought he was doing something great, but when they listened to the film, he was kind of rawing it on. Mm-hmm. They arrested him. Mm-hmm. We have to have accountability. Because you wear blue, yes, you need protection, but don't we?
That's your job, is to serve and protect us.
Serve and protect. Teachers, your job is to teach. You know, I'm going to put a little joke in here now, moving to education, because I want to talk a little bit about education in the hospital. You know, the teachers, you know how they used to call home and say, little boy is acting so bad, I can't teach him. And you'd be like, do your job. Since we've had distant learning, I've been like, oh, Lord, y'all was right.
Yeah.
Little Johnny is bad. He won't sit still, you know. So,
yeah.
Think about having 37 of those little people in your room.
Yes, all the time.
I have a new respect for education. I have a new respect for teachers. But, you know, with the medical, I also believe that with this virus, people who survive it are going to be in so much debt. One of the number one things that put people in bankruptcy is the medical.
Yes.
Lack of medical insurance, underinsurance. And so again, I'm going to kind of say we got to do something about voting.
Yes.
Vote.
Yeah.
Because we got to keep this health care. We have to keep Affordable Care Act up. Yeah. You know, we have to, because we have people who are ill. People that look like me don't trust doctors. They're already saying the covert virus, every disease that comes out affects my community more than anybody. Yeah. Why is that? We have poor health care. Mm-hmm. Community clinics. Go to a community clinic and see what you feel like, how you feel you're being treated. It's to hurry up and sit and wait. I wish we could be like Canada and do some universal health care. And then if you're rich and you want to get a better doctor, go spend your money.
Yeah, you can go do whatever you want.
Everybody should have equal care, equal medicine. One of my grandchildren had leukemia when he was a little boy. We were fortunate. My husband and myself had him on our insurance, so he was doubly insured. One pill that he had to take in his treatment cost $700. One pill.
Yeah.
And he had to take it every month for 14 days.
Wow.
How unfair is that? What happens to the person who isn't double insured? What happens to the senior that has to choose food, medicine, because the cost is so great?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, my father actually is taking pills for chemotherapy, and insurance doesn't cover it. And it was thousands of dollars every month, you know, and he keeps asking, you know, I'm lucky I have built a savings. What would it be like if I were, you know, poverty, or, you know, person of color who hasn't had the same opportunities? I mean, it's drastic. It's very, very drastic.
Can I go back to the question that the person had asked?
Yes.
about policing? Where do we stand on internal policy changes that punishes officers?
Yes.
I think one of the things that's necessary is you cannot have police officers investigating themselves.
Right.
Really?
You can't have that.
I agree with you.
Yes.
Totally.
You have to have an external body that will deal with police officers. Once you have internal affairs dealing with police officers, they're going to get off.
Yeah.
Because it's not in their best interest to show that police officers have done anything wrong. So that's one thing. That's something that has to happen. You need an outside body to deal with police issues. You can't have it internal. And you need a body that's overseeing what police officers do. Police officers cannot be above the law. They cannot. In a way, we expect them to be held to a higher standard, but they can't take the law into their own hands. And if a police officer does something that the regular public does, and that person in the public gets punished for it, police officers should be the same.
I agree.
You can't have two different sets of laws. You can't have a set of laws for police officers and a set of laws for the rest of the public.
Well,
Makes no sense.
The fact that we have an administration that thinks they're above the law. So
I don't even want to go there.
Right.
I know.
There is a comment in the chat. I'll just read it. It's not a question, but it says, there is a new law that requires California officers to only use deadly force if it's necessary to protect against an imminent threat of death or serious injury, while previously California police officers, like officers in most states, could use deadly force if it was deemed reasonable. Lots of changes of this sort are needed. So I'm sure you both agree with that statement.
Yes, I agree. But my comment is, who decides what's necessary?
Right.
That's what I'm thinking.
And
Who makes the decision with the cop in the middle? The cop in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who thinks they're being threatened. You know, they shot the guy in the back.
Yes.
He was a drunk driver, right?
Yeah, he was running away.
They had his license. They knew where he was going.
Yes.
He broke and ran in the opposite direction. He snatched a taser. They knew it was a taser, but they killed him.
Yes.
What kind of intimate domain, what kind of necessary force do you need? And I'm running away from you.
Especially when officers will always say, I felt that my life was in danger.
Right. They can always say that.
Yeah. And this is another case. This is another case of us knowing exactly what happened, because they had, not only did they have people videotaping it, but they had videotape from the store.
Yeah.
So it's like the whole thing of it's necessary. Like that's not strong enough for me.
Yeah.
It's not strong enough for me.
So I want to respect everyone's time. We have 6 minutes until the end. So what I'd love to do is give each of you, it's kind of like closing statements in court. I'd like to time you, but I'd like to give each of you 2 minutes. And here's my question for you. So just think about it for a moment if you're willing. As a person of color, what do you want? And you just think about it for a minute, and then when you're ready, let me know, and I'll give you each a full 2 minutes to to share? My phone alarm has crickets, so as soon as it goes off, you're done. So what, as a person of color, what do you want?
Okay, I'll go.
Okay, go ahead.
What do I want? Just to be treated like a normal human being, to be respected, to not be followed around. If I go into a store and have people automatically think that I'm going to steal something or I don't have the money for it. It's just a matter of feeling like a human being and not having to justify myself.
Mhm.
I don't have children, but I have friends who have children who have had to give the talk. That should not be necessary.
Mhm.
I'm done.
We still have a minute and
I know,
40 seconds.
but that's I just want to be treated. I just want to be treated like to be treated equally with everyone else. I'm not asking for special treatment.
Mm-mm.
I don't want anything special, but I want to have the same opportunity as a person who is not of color, as a white person. I wanted to be respected, and I just want to live my life without fear.
And with dignity.
Luckily, in my city, I'm not afraid, but I'm afraid of coming south of the border. I really am afraid of coming south of the border because I have a sense of what would happen to me, and I'm not prepared to put myself into that situation.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Thank you very much, Karen.
I'm done.
Yeah. Sharon, would you like to share?
So, I want everything you want, Carol, but I called it equality. I want equality. I want to know when I wake up in the morning, I start out on the same, we all start out on the same line.
Yeah.
I want to know that my grandchildren will not, let me take them out the picture. I want to know in 2030 that we're not sitting doing this again.
Yeah.
I'm tired. That's what I was crying the other night. I'm tired. I've seen this go on my entire life. When does it stop? Right now, everybody is, hey, Black Lives Matters. It got to matter every day, 365 days out of the year, every year.
Yes.
I think, that would make me happy.
Yeah.
I think that, I went to school, I got a good education, and I remember hearing people say, oh, you're not one of them. I said, oh, you must have read that book that said 10% of us get out. I want everybody to have an equal chance. I want every person, because I know people not of color suffer too.
Yeah.
I know that we live in a cruel world where the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Why do we give so much credit to the rich people? If I tell you this all the time to my friends, if every rich Black person would put some money in our community, we wouldn't struggle so hard.
Amen.
We keep looking for somebody else to solve this problem. We got it. We got rich people so rich, Black rich people so rich, they never will be broke again.
Yeah.
And for generations and generations and generations.
Yeah.
Come home.
Yeah.
Help us.
Yeah.
Get some community centers. We need jobs for these young men. These young kids are selling dope because they ain't got no job.
Yep.
You can't live off of $5 an hour, $10 an hour.
Yeah.
Well, and a lot of the communities have convenience stores instead of grocery stores.
Exactly. There's no grocery stores.
Yeah. Ladies, I want to just thank you from I can't say the bottom of my heart, all of my heart, for showing up, for being here, for being willing to share, be vulnerable, give feedback. I did put some information for the people who are listening and watching. I put in the chat, and I'll also put in the Facebook group some resources that I collected, as well as resources that someone shared with me for people to become more learned and active allies. I am asking for donations so that we can help compensate panelists for their time, at least by giving them some little gift. And I also would love for you to share with me, maybe by email, ways that people can reach you so I can add that if they want to support your business or get you referrals. I've also listed the webinar dates for future webinars. There's another webinar on August 7th. I'm doing them every other Friday. And my friends Tony Thomas and Tracy Mitchell will be joining us. But I would love to interview men. I'd love to interview high schoolers, college students, people of color and I'd like to cross the generations. You know, I'd really love to have more people being able to speak and feel safe to speak. And I also will upload this webinar, as I've done the others, into my YouTube channel so people can catch up and watch all of them. And if you ever want to be on the panel again, I invite you both to please reach out and continue to share your wisdom and your love and your hopes with us, because just being able to hear you is a real gift. It's an honor for me to feel trusted by you enough, not even knowing Sharon very well at all since we just met, you know, by phone. But I just, yeah, I can't say enough how grateful I am. And yeah, I'm gonna stop the live stream on Facebook, but I wanted to give you one last chance to say anything you wish before I end everything for this evening.
Thank you. Thanks for asking me, and it was good. It was really good. And Sharon, I was thrilled to hear your perspective. Really, really thrilled. And I love your passion and your energy. I really do. And I love what you do. You have such a huge heart. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I was going to say that too. Thank you for inviting me. You know, you won't believe this, but I'm very shy. No, I really am. My friends will tell you. They all, you know, but I'm passionate about things, and that takes me out of that place. So thank you, Misha, for giving me an opportunity to come out of that place, you know, because I'm always preaching to the choir over here, you know. Thank you for giving me a platform. Thank you, Carol, for another perspective. You know, thank you both.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So I'll stop the recording here on the